Fresh out of college with my business degree, I found myself back in my childhood home. I'm Anna, 22 years old, and honestly, I hadn't planned on moving back in with my parents. But here I was. The job hunt didn't take long. Thankfully, within a week, I landed a position at Davidson Marketing with a pretty decent salary and promising performance bonuses. That evening, over Mom's meatloaf, I shared my good news. I figured I'd stay here for about 3 months, save up some money, and then get my own apartment. The clinking of forks against plates stopped abruptly. Mom and Dad exchanged one of their looks, the kind that always meant trouble. Moving out? Mom set down her fork. Anna, you know I can only work part-time at the library because of my back problems. Dad cleared his throat. And things aren't great at the plant. There have been rumors of layoffs. We could really use your help with the bills, Mom added softly. And you wouldn't have to pay rent here. It just makes more sense, doesn't it? I stared at my half-eaten meatloaf, feeling trapped. They had a point, sort of, and they were my parents after all. I guess I could stay longer, I murmured. Life fell into a routine after that. I went to work, came home, paid the bills, and Mom made sure dinner was always on the table. It seemed okay. Manageable, even. Until last weekend, when my sister Sarah showed up with her husband Mike and their kids, Emma and Lucas. The change in my parents was like someone had flipped a switch. "Oh, my precious angels," Mom cooed, scooping up 4-year-old Emma while Dad swung Lucas onto his shoulders. "Sarah, darling, you look wonderful. How's everything going? Tell us all about what you've been up to." I stood in the doorway, watching as my parents fawned over their eldest daughter and her perfect little family. The way they hung on her every word, asking for details about the most mundane things, how her garden was doing, what new words Lucas had learned, how her book club was going. They'd never shown that kind of interest in my life, not even when I made Dean's List or won the business school's leadership award. "Anna, be a dear and put on some coffee," Mom called over her shoulder, not even looking my way as she bounced Lucas on her knee. Standing in the kitchen that day, listening to my family's laughter from the living room, I couldn't help but think back to how things had always been this way. Sarah, 7 years my senior, had always been the star of our family show, while I was relegated to the role of supporting cast. I remembered sitting at the same kitchen table when I was 11, showing Mom my straight-A report card. She barely glanced at it before returning to her conversation with Sarah about college applications. "That's nice, Anna," she said absently, waving me away. "Sarah, honey, which universities are your top choices?" Those years were all about Sarah's high school achievements. Every dinner conversation revolved around her grades, her extracurriculars, her college prep. I'd sit there quietly eating my peas while Mom and Dad hung on Sarah's every word about her AP classes and college tours. Everything changed even more dramatically when Sarah got accepted to university. I was 11 at the time, and I still remember that dinner conversation like it was yesterday. "We're so proud of you, sweetheart," Mom exclaimed, tears in her eyes. "We'll make it work, won't we, Robert?" Dad nodded solemnly. "We'll take out a student loan. Our Sarah deserves the best education possible." A week after Sarah left for college, they sat me down for a different kind of talk. "Anna," Dad said, his voice serious, "we need to tighten our belts for a while. The loan payments and Sarah's college expenses are significant." That's when things really changed. While my classmates got new phones every year, I kept my old flip phone until it literally fell apart. When I needed new clothes, we went to thrift stores instead of the mall. Christmas gifts became practical items like socks and school supplies. But they never forgot to send Sarah money. "Your sister needs to focus on her studies," Mom would say as she wrote another check. "We can't let her feel stressed about money." I learned my lesson early. At 15, I joined every club and academic competition I could find. I stayed up late studying, not just for good grades, but for perfect ones. I wrote essays for scholarship competitions until my hands cramped, because I knew that there would be no student loans for me. If I wanted college, I'd have to earn it myself. And I did. I got a full scholarship to State University, and I still remember the look of relief on my parents' faces when I told them they wouldn't have to spend a dime on my education. Meanwhile, Sarah graduated, got a job in Brighton, and quickly married Mike, her college sweetheart. Within 2 years, she had Emma and Lucas. My parents were over the moon. Their perfect daughter had created a perfect family. Now every monthly visit turned into the same routine. Sarah and Mike would show up with the kids, and before I could even say hello properly, Sarah would be planning her weekend. "Anna, you'll watch Emma and Lucas while we go shopping, right?" she'd say, not really asking. "Mike and I hardly get any alone time these days." The first few times I tried to suggest that our parents could watch them instead. "Oh, honey," Mom would say, rubbing her back. "You know it's hard for me to keep up with young children, and your father needs his rest on weekends." So here I was, spending yet another Saturday watching Frozen for the 100th time with Emma, while Lucas tried to color on my bedroom walls. Sarah and Mike were off having lunch with friends, and our parents were puttering around the garden, occasionally peeking in to ask if I needed anything, as if they were doing me a favor. I tried to console myself with the thought that it was just one weekend a month, just one weekend of being the free, reliable babysitter while everyone else lived their lives. A year passed in this monthly rhythm of babysitting and bills. I had almost gotten used to it. Almost. Then came the phone call that would turn my already complicated life completely upside down. I was doing dishes after dinner when I heard Mom's phone ring from the kitchen. I could hear her surprised voice. "Sarah? Oh, sweetheart, don't cry. Tell me what happened." Through sobs, Sarah explained that Mike's company had gone bankrupt without warning. They couldn't afford their rent anymore and had no savings. Could we maybe stay with you for a while?" Sarah's voice was so loud through the phone that I could hear it clearly. "Of course you can," Mom exclaimed without a moment's hesitation. "We'll make room." My stomach dropped. I stepped forward, clearing my throat. If they're moving in, maybe this would be a good time for me to get my own apartment." "You'd think I'd suggested burning down the house." Mom looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Anna, don't be ridiculous. There's plenty of room for everyone." "But we're family," Dad said firmly. "We stick together during hard times." They arrived the following weekend with 3 cars full of belongings. I spent Saturday morning moving my things into what had been our storage room, the smallest bedroom in the house, barely big enough for a twin bed and a dresser. My old room, which was twice the size, became the kids' nursery. "Because the children need space to play," Mom explained. Emma, now 5, and 3-year-old Lucas treated the entire house like their personal playground. They ran up and down the hallways screaming and laughing, while Sarah watched TV at full volume or held long, loud phone conversations with her friends about how difficult this transition was for her. "Emma, Lucas, keep it down!" I'd call out when they burst into my room for the 10th time, scattering my work papers everywhere. "They're just playing, Anna," Sarah would say dismissively, not even looking up from her phone. "Don't be such a grouch." After work, all I wanted was to relax in my room, maybe read a book or watch something on my laptop. Instead, I got to listen to Baby Shark playing on repeat through the thin walls, punctuated by the constant thump of little feet running back and forth, and Sarah's loud laughter at whatever show she was watching downstairs. Mike spent his days supposedly job hunting, but mostly I saw him sitting at the kitchen table scrolling through his phone with a worried expression. "The job market's tough right now," he'd say whenever anyone asked, "but I'm sure something will come up soon." I lay in my tiny bed each night, staring at the ceiling, listening to the chaos that had become my home, and wondered how I'd let myself get trapped in this situation. But every time I thought about bringing up moving out again, I remembered my parents' reaction and kept quiet. The first utility bill after Sarah's family moved in hit me like a punch to the gut. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the numbers that were almost double what I usually paid. The water bill alone had skyrocketed, not to mention electricity and heating. Looking at my bank account, I realized that my dreams of saving for my own place were quickly evaporating. That evening at dinner, I decided to bring it up. "So, about the utility bills," I started, pushing my peas around the plate. "They doubled since last month. I can't keep covering all the bills by myself anymore. It's taking almost my entire salary." Sarah's fork clattered against her plate. "Are you seriously complaining about money right now, when Mike and I have lost everything?" "I'm not complaining," I said carefully. "I just think we need to figure out a fair way to—" "I can't believe how selfish you're being." Sarah's voice rose. "We're going through the hardest time of our lives, and all you care about is money?" "Sarah's right, Anna," Mom jumped in. "Family helps family. That's what we do." Dad nodded solemnly. "Your sister and Mike need our support right now. This isn't the time to be counting pennies." I looked down at my plate, swallowing the words I really wanted to say. "Fine, never mind." A week later, Mike finally got a job at an insurance company. It paid less than his previous position, but at least it was something. I thought maybe things would start getting better. I was wrong. "It's so hard being alone with the kids all day," Sarah started complaining almost immediately. "Mike leaves at 8 and doesn't get back until 6. I never get a break." Then it started, small requests at first. "Anna, could you watch the kids for an hour while I run to the store?" "Anna, would you mind keeping an eye on them while I take a shower?" Before I knew it, these small favors had snowballed into something much bigger. I'd come home from work to find Sarah already dressed up to go out. "Oh, good, you're home," she'd say, grabbing her purse. "Mike and I are meeting friends for dinner. Emma and Lucas already had their snack, but they'll need dinner in an hour. We'll be back by 10. Weekends became my personal nightmare. Sarah and Mike would casually announce their plans on Friday evening, a shopping trip, lunch with friends, a movie date, leaving me with the kids for hours. Mom and Dad conveniently started visiting relatives more often, usually disappearing right after Sarah and Mike left. So there I'd be, weekend after weekend, trying to keep Emma from drawing on the walls while Lucas had another tantrum because I cut a sandwich the wrong way. I'd spend my Saturdays cleaning up toys, making mac and cheese, and watching endless repeats of children's movies. By Sunday night, I'd be exhausted, my house would be a mess, and I'd still need to cook dinner for everyone. One evening, after a particularly exhausting weekend of childcare, I finally worked up the courage to say something at dinner. "I need to talk to you all," I said, setting down my fork. "I'm really tired. The situation with the childcare isn't working for me." Sarah's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing. "What do you mean, isn't working? Are you saying you don't want to spend time with your own nephews?" Mom reached over and patted Sarah's hand. "Don't worry, honey. This is actually good practice for Anna. She'll need to know how to handle children when she becomes a mother herself someday. Think of it as training." And just like that, they went back to their usual dinner conversation. Sarah talking about her day, Mom and Dad hanging on her every word, Mike nodding along. I sat there invisible once again, pushing food around my plate. Nothing changed after that conversation. If anything, it got worse. Sarah and Mike seemed to take my complaint as a challenge, finding even more reasons to go out. They'd be waiting by the door when I got home from work, car keys in hand. "We're meeting friends at that new restaurant downtown," they'd say, already halfway out the door. "Kids have had their snack. Thanks, Anna." Weekends became something I dreaded. I'd wake up on Saturday mornings with a knot in my stomach, knowing I'd spend the next 2 days watching Paw Patrol and mediating sibling fights while Sarah and Mike lived their best lives. Then came a Wednesday that changed everything. I was at my desk at work trying to focus on a marketing report despite my exhaustion when my friend Rachel stopped by my cubicle. "Hey, want to do something fun this weekend?" she asked, perching on the edge of my desk. "A bunch of us are going to the Pine Ridge Ski Resort. Just a quick weekend getaway. Leave Saturday morning, come back Sunday night. The slopes are supposed to be perfect right now." For the first time in months, I felt a spark of excitement. Friday evening, I was in my tiny bedroom, packing my duffel bag, actually feeling happy about an upcoming weekend for once. I had just folded my warmest sweater when Sarah appeared in my doorway. "What are you doing?" she asked, eyeing my half-packed bag. "Packing for a ski trip," I replied, rolling up my thermal socks. "Going to Pine Ridge with some friends from work." Sarah's face darkened. "You need to cancel." I looked up, startled by her tone. "What? Why would I do that?" "Because," she said, crossing her arms, "Mike and I are going to Aunt Linda's 60th birthday party in Millbrook this weekend. Mom and Dad are coming too. You need to stay here with Emma and Lucas." I couldn't help but laugh. Actually laugh out loud at the sheer audacity of it all. "You're joking, right?" I said, continuing to fold my ski pants. "You can't seriously expect me to cancel my plans because you didn't bother to tell me about yours." Sarah's face turned red. "This isn't funny, Anna. You're being completely unreasonable." "No, what's unreasonable is assuming I'll drop everything at a moment's notice to be your personal babysitter. Again." Sarah's mouth fell open. She stood there for a moment, sputtering before turning on her heel and storming out of my room. "Mom, Dad, Mike!" I could hear her shouting down the hallway. "You won't believe what Anna is doing." I kept packing, my hands shaking slightly with anger. The thundering of footsteps announced the arrival of the cavalry. My tiny room suddenly felt even smaller as Sarah, Mike, and my parents crowded in. Mom's face was already set in that disappointed expression I knew so well. "What's this about you going skiing?" she demanded, hands on her hips. "Exactly what it sounds like," I replied, zipping up my duffel bag. "I'm going to Pine Ridge Resort with my friends for the weekend." "But you can't," Sarah exclaimed. "We have Aunt Linda's party." "No, you have Aunt Linda's party," I corrected her. I stopped what I was doing and turned to face them all. Why am I just hearing about this party now? Why wasn't I included in any of the planning? Mom hesitated, looking uncomfortable for the first time. Sarah jumped in, her voice dripping with condescension. "We all discussed it and decided this would work best for everyone. We go to the party. You watch the kids. It's the most logical arrangement." "You all discussed it," I repeated slowly, "without me, and decided what I would be doing with my weekend. How convenient." Well, you can't exactly bring small children to a sophisticated party, Sarah sniffed. Aunt Linda specifically said no kids. I shouldered my duffel bag. Sounds like a you problem. They're your kids, Sarah. Figure it out. What's that supposed to mean? Mike finally spoke up, frowning. It means exactly what it sounds like. I have plans. I'm going skiing. Your children are your responsibility, not mine. If you can't bring them to the party, either don't go or hire a babysitter. A babysitter? Sarah screeched. With what money? Again, not my problem. I turned to face them all, suddenly feeling stronger than I had in months, maybe years. Let me make this perfectly clear. I am going skiing tomorrow. I am done being your free, convenient babysitter. I'm done having my weekends hijacked, my plans ignored, and my life treated like it doesn't matter. If you need childcare, Sarah, that's your responsibility as a parent. Stop assuming I'll always be there to pick up your slack. The silence that followed was deafening. They all stared at me as if I'd suddenly started speaking in tongues. Sarah's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Mom looked like she'd been slapped. Dad seemed to be trying to disappear into the doorframe. And Mike, well, Mike just stood there with that same confused expression he'd been wearing since his company went bankrupt. The moment of shocked silence didn't last long. Sarah's face crumpled and she burst into theatrical sobs, covering her face with her hands. Mike muttered something that sounded distinctly like ungrateful under his breath. How dare you? Mom's voice rose. After everything we've done for you, you're being completely irresponsible. Selfish. Dad chimed in, shaking his head. Absolutely selfish. I stood there, my duffel bag still over my shoulder, watching my family turn into a Greek chorus of accusations. The words washed over me. Selfish, ungrateful, inconsiderate, immature. Each one meant to cut deep, to put me back in my place. Then, Mom delivered what she clearly thought would be the knockout blow. If you walk out that door tomorrow, don't bother coming back to this house. To everyone's surprise, I burst out laughing. Not a nervous giggle, but a full, genuine laugh. They all stared at me as if I'd lost my mind. You know what's funny? I said, wiping tears from my eyes. I've been dreaming about moving out of this house for months. I just didn't have the courage to do it. But here you are, giving me the perfect excuse. So thank you, Mom. Get out! Sarah shrieked, her fake sobs forgotten in her rage. Just get out. Gladly. I pulled out my phone and dialed Rachel's number, putting it on speaker just to make a point. Hey, Rach, sorry to call so late, but is that offer to crash at your place still good? Not just for after skiing, but maybe for a few days? Of course. Rachel's cheerful voice filled the room. I have a spare room. Want to come over now? That would be perfect. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I spent the next 15 minutes gathering everything I could fit in my car. Clothes, important documents, personal items. They watched from various doorways as I made trips up and down the stairs, as if they couldn't quite believe I was really doing it. When I had loaded the last box, I walked into the living room where they had all gathered. Oh, one more thing, I said, my voice steady. Since I won't be living here anymore, I won't be paying any of the bills either. You'll need to figure out how to support yourselves. Mom's face went pale. But the utilities, the groceries. Not my problem anymore, I said, echoing my words from earlier. I turned and walked out the front door, ignoring Mom's suddenly panicked calls behind me. The drive to Rachel's place was a blur of adrenaline and relief. My phone kept lighting up with calls and messages, angry texts from Sarah, guilt-tripping novels from Mom, stern disappointments from Dad. I ignored them all. The next morning, Rachel and I drove to Pine Ridge Resort as planned. For the first time in what felt like forever, I spent a weekend doing exactly what I wanted to do. We skied, we laughed, we had hot chocolate by the fire. And not once did I have to worry about anyone else's children or problems. When we got back Sunday night, I opened my laptop and started searching for apartments. With my salary no longer going to support my family, I could actually afford a decent place. By Wednesday, I had found a small but bright one-bedroom apartment in a nice area of town, just a 15-minute drive from my office. My first week in my new apartment was like learning to breathe again. Every morning I woke up to blessed silence. No screaming children, no blaring TV, no guilt-inducing sighs from my mother. I could make coffee and drink it while it was still hot. I could spend my evenings reading or watching whatever I wanted on Netflix. The messages kept coming, though. I didn't answer the calls, but I couldn't help reading the texts. They followed a predictable pattern. Mom, how could you abandon your family like this? We need you. Sarah, you're so selfish. The kids keep asking where Aunt Anna is. Dad, your mother is very upset. You need to make this right. The messages cycled between guilt trips and anger, accusations, and pleas. I read them all but responded to none. My silence seemed to drive them even crazier. They weren't used to not having power over me. After a week of this, I was sitting on my new couch when Mom's number flashed on my phone again. This time I decided to answer. "Anna, finally!" Mom's voice was sharp. "I can't believe you ruined our entire weekend. Aunt Linda's party was completely disrupted because of your selfish behavior. Sarah and Mike couldn't come because you refused to watch the children." "Stop!" My voice was quiet but firm. "Just stop. I'm done with this, Mom. I'm done being treated like a servant in my own home. I'm done being expected to sacrifice everything, my time, my money, my life, for everyone else's convenience. I'm done being the family ATM and free babysitter while being treated like I don't matter." There was a long pause on the other end. When Mom spoke again, her voice had changed to that wheedling tone I knew so well. "Honey, I know things haven't been perfect, but we're family. We need you. The bill's this month. We're struggling without your help." "No, Mom, I'm done. Maybe someday we can have a relationship again, but it will be on equal terms. No more manipulation, no more guilt trips, no more treating me like a walking wallet or free childcare service. Until then, I need space to live my own life." I hung up and immediately blocked her number. Then I went through my phone and blocked them all. Mom, Dad, Sarah, even Mike. I blocked them on social media too. It felt both terrifying and liberating, like cutting anchor lines I hadn't even realized were holding me down. Maybe someday I'll be ready to have my family back in my life. Maybe, with enough time and distance, we can build something new, something healthier, with boundaries and respect. Or maybe we won't. Either way, I'm done sacrificing my own happiness and well-being to meet their endless demands.